listeners. So, welcome back aboard the Paranormal Express. At least that's where I assume this recording I'm doing right now will be headed. I had recorded it, I was going to do a third sort of episode as a Halloween special for Spellbound Soiree, as I hadn't done one in a while. And I got the idea for one in my head. And I've written it, it's there. But when I recorded it, I accidentally had something set and it just didn't record quite as well as I would have liked. So hopefully I can get that fixed at some point or re-record it and get that out eventually. But it likely, today is Halloween. I'm literally recording this on Halloween, so it wouldn't be much of a Halloween special, in the middle of November or something like that, depending on how long it takes me to re-record it or fix it. But shouldn't be that long. Unless other things get in the way. But yes, I digress. I've decided that for this Halloween, I would like to do a sort of reading of a story. One that I haven't actually read before, so bear with me. I will probably trip up on my words. I do normally anyways. But I've done this sort of thing before. A few years ago, I did reading. It wasn't on Halloween. This was just the cover for my co-host having escaped from the train, his confinement. I think that was what I called it back then. In reality, he had COVID. He was sick. But yeah, sorry to lift the veil for a moment there. But he was actually just confined, yes. He had escaped. But yeah, so I think during that time I did a couple different things. One of them was reading short stories and poems by Edgar Allan Poe. Just because I thought they fit with the theme of the show, and it had been a long time since I had read any of Poe's work, and he's one of my favorite authors. He still is. I haven't read him again in a while, though. I haven't read much of anything in a while, though, to be fair. So yeah, today I'm going to read a short story by him, and it may not be very long. This may be the shortest episode of this podcast, or I may add more on at the end. We will see. It depends on how short this is. But I accidentally backed out of the thing. But I am going to be reading, trying to get back to page 1 so that I can read the full title because it's blocked on that page. I'm reading the short story by him called The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar. It's supposedly one of Poe's more gruesome or horrifying stories, but I don't know. That was just someone's opinion that I read online, so take that with a grain of salt. I haven't read this story before. I may go back to that thread and see some of the other ones if this one's rather short. It seems to be short, but I don't know how quick I will read through it because I'm stupid. Not really, but, well, yes, but I digress. But yeah, so I guess I can get started. I'll read this little, not excerpt, but like preamble from, I guess whoever collected this story. I don't know if it's just in this specific version I have here or all versions. But yeah, I'll try to throw up some images or something, or like a recreation of some of the images that are in this version. It could be the original ones, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. We shall see. I mostly just want to do this because I feel like it's a fairly quick and easy thing for me to do for Halloween. It's also just not something I usually do. And the reason I wanted something quick and easy, like I said, is because I had planned on doing a Spellbound Soiree thing, but that sort of fell flat literally a few moments ago. So I'm still reeling from that a little bit. But this was something else that I had on the back burn that I wanted to do, but didn't know if I'd have the time. But yeah, so I'll read this now. Mesmerism in this gruesome story by Edgar Allan Poe has again been used as a vehicle for telling us his views about the higher philosophy and the future world. Mesmerism, in another of Poe's stories, Mesmeric Revelations, is made an agreeable setting for some of his philosophy, which he is willing to tell us about without forcing it upon us in the too prevalent modern system. But here we find the same author in a somewhat different character. It is again mesmerism, which he employs. It is again a bit of philosophy to be told to us, but the story leads up gradually and most skillfully to a... Now, I don't know this word, and I did read it before, and I should have looked it up, but I did not. It looks like it says denouement, or denouement. I will look that up really quick. There it is. Can I hear it? Denouement. Denouement. That was not a pronunciation I was expecting. I have actually heard that word used before, but I didn't know it was spelled that way. The final part of a play, movie, or narrative in which the strands of the plot are drawn together and matters are explained or resolved. That makes sense. Though I can't remember where I heard it, but that sounds correct. Or that sounds familiar in the context that I don't have, that I feel like I have. This is a weird thing that I'm going on a tangent about anyway. And most skillfully to a denouement, the most horrifying and terrible in all modern storytelling. This very short story and its horror is unique. So that kind of sets us up for an interesting story, I guess. I don't know. It hypes it up quite a lot, I feel. But yeah. So the only thing I know about this story, or what I can kind of get from this page that I'm looking at, is I can see an image of 4 men, it looks like. One of them is being carried or held back. Maybe he's like crying or something, I don't know. He's kind of like hunched over a little bit and being held by another one of the men there. But they're all around this other man on a deathbed. So there's 5 men in total. One of them is, well, on his deathbed, presumably, from the context of this story anyway, and some of this other stuff I can see. The description says, a black and white drawing of a man in bed with other men standing beside it and recoiling from him. Why are they recoiling, though, I wonder? I guess we'll find out when we read the story. There's a quote under this, though, that says, "For God's sake, quick, put me to sleep," or quick, waken me, quick, I say to you that I am dead. So I assume he's dead. And I'm assuming that is Valdemar, whoever Valdemar is. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that image and stuff before I got into the story properly. I'm gonna take a bit of a drink. I also thought about doing this as like a live stream, but I don't know if I can stream stuff like that. Well, I probably can stream this. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's in the public domain. I think most of Poe's works are in the public domain. Could be wrong, though. So I'm gonna get started now, I guess. Of course, I shall not pretend to consider it any matter for wonder that the extraordinary case of M. Valdemar has excited discussion. It would have been a miracle had it not, especially under the circumstances. Through the desire of all parties concerned to keep the affair from the public, at least for the present, or until we had farther opportunities. Why does it say farther? That should be further, I feel like. Anyway, further opportunities for investigation through our endeavors to effect this, a garbled or exaggerated account made its way into society and became the source of many unpleasant misrepresentations and very naturally of a great deal of disbelief. Okay, so it seems at this point, from the storyteller's perspective, whatever happened to Valdemar has already happened, and it was so shocking or something that exaggerated versions of it have sort of telephoned their way to the public. And so it seems that now he's going to tell the story as he knows it, which I assume he's meant to be one of the men there around the bed. It is now rendered necessary that I give the facts as far as I comprehend them myself. They are succinctly these. My attention for the last 3 years had been repeatedly drawn to the subject of mesmerism, and about 9 months ago, it occurred to me, quite suddenly, that in the series of experiments made hitherto, there had been a very remarkable and most unaccountable omission. No person had yet been mesmerized in articulo mortis. It remained to be seen, first, whether in such condition there existed in the patient any susceptibility to the magnetic influence. Secondly, whether, if any existed, it was impaired or increased by the condition. Thirdly, to what extent, for how long a period, the encroachments of death might be arrested by the process. There were other points to be ascertained, but these most excited my curiosity. The last and especial, from the immensely important character of its consequences. So that last line confuses me a little bit, mostly because of the use of especial rather than... I'm assuming he means like... Maybe is that like a word that's kind of not lost fully, because like we have the word especially, but we don't really use the word especial anymore. That's kind of interesting, at least from an etymological perspective. I don't know if that's the case. I just see the word special there. And I'm confused by it. I'm just going to reread that last line really quick. There were other points to be ascertained, but these most excited my curiosity. Okay, that makes sense. The last in a special. Okay, so especially the last one. So, which one was that? Thirdly, to what extent, for how long a period, the encroachments of death might be arrested by the process. Okay. So, how long death can be prevented by the process of mesmerism. I haven't looked up mesmerism or learned about it in a very long time, but I feel like I should give you a definition, because I have a vague idea in my head, but I don't want to just speak from vague memories. So the historical is just... Oh, well, it says in general use hypnotism, which was kind of what that's kind of the vibe I get from this description already, or from what how he's talking about it already. But I feel like there's more to it. See, he mentions like magnetism, and this is the Merriam-Webster definition mentions something about that. The meaning of mesmerism is hypnotic induction held to involve animal magnetism, broadly hypnotism. So it's more specific than just hypnotism. But it has something to do with animal magnetism. Okay, but what exactly is animal magnetism? Oh, well, luckily there's the Wikipedia page for animal magnetism. Oh, animal magnetism, also known as mesmerism, is a theory invented by German doctor Franz Mesmer. So that's where we get, okay. In the 18th century, it posits the existence of an invisible natural force, Lebensmagnetismus, possessed by all living things, including humans, animals, and vegetables. That's strange, but okay. He claimed that the force could... what is this, Star Wars? Anyway, he claimed that the force could have physical effects, including healing. I mean, force healing is a thing in Star Wars, so maybe he was onto something. He was the George Lucas of the 1800s. The vitalist theory attracted numerous followers in Europe and the United States, and was popular. So maybe the idea here with Valdemar, or what this guy is talking about, is that maybe death could be prevented completely through mesmerism. At least on the outset. I mean, obviously, this is Edgar Allan Poe, so no, it can't. I don't think he would ever write a story in which death does not. Well, I think he has plenty of stories where no one dies, but other, dark stuff does. Anyway, he has a lot of death, though. That was my point. The vitalist theory attracted numerous followers in Europe and the United States. Was popular into the 19th century. Practitioners were often known as magnetizers rather than mesmerists. It had an important influence in medicine for about 75 years from its beginning in 1779, and continued to have some influence for another 50 years. Hundreds of books were written on the subject between 1766 and 1925, but it is no longer practiced today except as a form of alternative medicine in some places. Okay. That's kind of interesting. I still don't quite understand it. I understand, I know every word that's here. I understand what it's saying, but I don't get what it means, if that makes sense. I feel like it's something that you have to read more about than just a little blurb on Wikipedia. You don't have to read the full article. No, I'm not going to do that right now. I can look at some of the, but maybe in this case it has something to do with vitalists, since it mentions that, well, it says Europe and the United States, so maybe this is like a vitalist thing? I don't know. Maybe I should just continue with the story, though. The last in a special from the immensely important character of its consequences. Okay, so yeah, that seems to make sense now. That he really cares about that third point about if the encroachment of death can be prevented or stopped entirely, maybe, potentially. Which, fair enough, I suppose, from a perspective of someone who truly believes in this stuff. But yeah, as we know from, that picture and snippet on the side, quote, yeah, that guy's dead. Anyway. Oh. We're about to learn Valdemar's first name, and does not start with M. M is like a title or something? I don't know. Anyway. And looking around for some subject by whose means I might test these particulars, I was brought to think of my friend M. Ernest Valdemar, the well-known compiler of the Bibliotheca Forensica, and author under the nom de plume of Izakhar Mars, of the Polish versions of Wallenstein and Gargantua. M. Valdemar, who had resided principally at Harlem, New York, since the year 1839, is or was particularly noticeable for the extreme spareness of his person, his lower limbs much resembling those of John Randolph. Who? Who is that? Who is John Randolph? Is that supposed to be important to me? Am I supposed to get that? Is that like a reference? John Randolph of Roanoke? Is that who he's referencing? Maybe? He would have died about 6 years before this guy is mentioned, 1839. He died in 1833. Oh. I think I see what he means now. There's a drawing of the guy here, and he has very skinny legs. Like, remarkably skinny. I wonder if it'll mention that on, like, he was in the House of Representatives, okay. He has such skinny legs, okay, I guess that's what he's referencing? So, Valdemar was just a thin man, I guess. Particularly noticeable for the extreme spareness of his person. Okay, yes, he was just a very thin and like wispy, I guess, of a man, wisp of a man, whatever. His lower limbs resembling those of John Randolph. And also for his whiteness of his whiskers, in violent contrast to the blackness of his hair. So his like facial hair was like stark white, but his hair was like jet black, I guess. I mean, that's kind of plainly written there. I don't know why I had to explain that. Anyway, the latter in consequence being very generally mistaken for a wig. His temperament was markedly nervous and rendered him a good subject for mesmeric experiment. On 2 or 3 occasions, I had put him to sleep with little difficulty, but was disappointed in other results which his peculiar constitution had naturally led me to anticipate. His will was at no period positively or thoroughly under my control, and in regard to clairvoyance, I could accomplish with him nothing to be relied upon. Okay. So he can't trust any of the experiments he does with the guy? For what reason? His will at no period positively or thoroughly under my control. Okay, so mesmerism seems, at least in this case, seems to be exerting your will or magnetism, your force, upon another, and controlling them through it, hypnotizing them through it. Okay. And he was not able to do that fully with, I almost called him Randolph, that's the guy he looks like, with Valdemar. Why? Then why does he think that he'll be a good subject for this test? So I'm just skimming over it to see if I can pick up on anything. I had put him to sleep with little difficulty, but was disappointed in other results which his peculiar constitution had naturally led me to anticipate. Okay, so he was able to put him to sleep, but he was not able to get him to do other things through the process of mesmerism. But then why? Does he think he's going to be able to induce this sort of state of death? Okay. I don't know. Let's just continue on. I always attributed my failure at these points to the disordered state of his health. For some months previous to my becoming acquainted with him, his physicians had declared him in a confirmed phthisis. I feel like I've seen that word before, but I've never actually seen it defined. Ah, okay. That would make sense why I've seen it, but never heard it defined. It's an archaic word. It's not really used anymore. It's a medical term for tuberculosis, essentially, or some similar progressive disease, systematic disease, whatever. So yeah, okay. It was his custom indeed to speak calmly of his approaching disillusion as of a matter neither to be avoided nor regretted. Okay, so that's why he thinks he'll be a good test for this, because he's gonna die anyway. Might as well be of use to me. Real piece of work, this guy. Alright. Anyway. When the ideas to which I have alluded first occurred to me, it was of course very natural that I should think of M. Valdemar. I knew the steady philosophy of the man too well to apprehend any scruples from him, and he had no relatives in America who would be likely to interfere. I spoke to him frankly upon the subject, and to my surprise, his interest seemed vividly excited. I say to my surprise, for although he had always yielded his person freely to my experiments, he had never before given me any tokens of sympathy with what I did. His disease was of the character which would admit of exact calculation in respect to the epoch of its termination in death. Okay, what did I just read? there was a lot of words there. His disease was of the character which would admit of exact calculation in respect to the epoch of its termination in death. I don't know what's throwing me off there, because I feel like that... Okay, so his disease was... I don't even know how to reword this. The characteristic of his disease... The exact calculation in respect to the epoch of its termination in death. So he knew exactly when he was gonna die? Is that what it's saying? What a weird way to word that, if that's what it's saying. I could be wrong. But I can't think of anything else from that line. I'll read it again just for those of you listening, because I realize I don't have the text up on screen or anything like that. His disease was of that character which would admit of exact calculation in respect to the epoch of its termination in death. Okay, so I'm sure I could look that up and find someone's explanation of that line. But I think I'm right. But I might be wrong. I could very easily be wrong. But it seems like it's saying that he knows when he's going to die, essentially. And that's the kind of disease he has. Is that his death is imminent and he knows it. And it was finally arranged between us that he would send for me about 24 hours before the period announced by his physicians as that of his decease. Okay, so yes, basically, they know when he's going to die, or his doctors do at least. And so they've arranged for him to, for the author, the speaker, whatever, to show up a day before he's supposed to die, and he's going to perform his experiments. Alright. It is now rather more than 7 months since I received from Valdemar himself the subjoined note. My dear, so some names here, before I read this note, and there's more further on in the story. It seems like some names are redacted. I don't know if that's just in this version, but I'll read the letter that is there. I will not be able to, of course, read the full name. They seem to be names for the most part, because they're not there. They're missing. That might be just how it is in this story. I don't know, because I have a specific version of it. And I don't know what it's like in other versions of it. If there are other versions, this might be the only version. I don't know. But anyway, I will continue reading. My dear P, you may as well come now. D and F are agreed that I cannot hold out beyond tomorrow. Midnight. And I think they have hit the time very nearly. Valdemar. Okay, so Valdemar's dying, basically. he's gonna croak due to tuberculosis or some similar disease. I received this note within half an hour after it was written. And in 15... How close do you live to him? Sorry, that thought just popped in my head when I read that. And in 15 minutes more, I was in the dying man's chamber. So you were, at the time at least, you were 15 minutes away from him. Do you just live, like, next door? Like, what the hell? I had not seen him for 10 days, and was appalled by the fearful alteration which the brief interval had wrought in him. His face wore a leaden hue. The eyes were utterly lusterless. And the emaciation was so extreme that the skin had been broken through by the cheekbones. His expression was excessive. The pulse was barely perceptible. He retained, nevertheless, in a very remarkable manner, both his mental power and a certain degree of physical strength. He spoke with distinctness, took some palliative medicines without aid, and, when I entered the room, was occupied in penciling memoranda in a pocketbook. He was propped up in the bed by pillows. Doctors D and F were in attendance. I don't know why I read that like there was more. That's the end of the paragraph. So that's just, I mean, I feel like that's pretty straightforward. That's just the description of the room. Well, not the room. Description of mostly Valdemar in his deathbed. It's interesting that, like, I don't know if that's actually possible for someone to be so emaciated that their cheekbones literally break through the skin. I hope not, because that's horrifying. But I feel like that's just an extreme description. Because I've seen extremely emaciated people, either through disease or through, not in person or anything, or through, I think there was that ascetic, am I even pronouncing that wrong? There was like a monk that was pretty viral online. I mean, not disease or sick, but like a few years ago, who I think was pretty emaciated. Though I couldn't see most of him, but I could see his face, and it didn't look like his cheekbones had broken through his skin. But anyway, after pressing Valdemar's hand, I took these gentlemen aside and like I said, bear with me, and obtained from them a minute account, or a minute account, don't know how I'm supposed to read that. I assume minute. And obtained from them a minute account of the patient's condition. The left lung had been for 18 months in a semi-osseous? I'm assuming osseous. Or cartilaginous state. What does that mean? I'm looking this up for me at this point. Osseous. Consisting of or turned to bone. That makes sense. Just given, like, what exactly is... Something to do with the bones, right? Ah, yes, osteoporosis is when your bones are, like, brittle and weak. Okay. So osseous, or osseous, is, his left lung had turned to bone. It had become like a stiffened state, I suppose. And maybe that's just a description because it was so stiff or rigid, hard, whatever, that they just described it as bone-like. Strange. And was of course entirely useless for all purposes of vitality. The right, in its upper portion, was also partially, if not thoroughly, ossified, while the lower region was merely a mass of purulent tubercles. Okay. So I assume that's something to do with tuberculosis? I don't want to look up more things. I will let you look that up if you want, but I've looked up enough, but I am still stalling at this point. Anyway. A mass of purulent tubercles running into one another. Or running one into another. Awesome. Oh no, I went up a line. Several extensive perforations existed, and at one point, permanent adhesion to the ribs had taken place. These appearances in the right lobe were of comparatively recent date. The ossification had proceeded with very unusual rapidity. No sign of it had been discovered a month before, and the adhesion had only observed during the three previous days. Independently of this, of the phthis, that word is spelled, since I'm probably mispronouncing it. PHTHISIS, if you didn't already know that. But I assume it's pronounced like pithis? Pithysis? Because I think I'm missing that last IS, or it was anyway. The patient was suspected of aneurysm of the aorta, but on this point, the osseous, whatever. I keep getting tripped up on that word, I'm sorry. Osseous symptoms rendered an exact diagnosis impossible. It was the opinion of both physicians that M. Valdemar would die about midnight on the morrow, Sunday. It was then 7 o'clock on Saturday evening. On quitting the invalid's bedside to hold conversation with myself, Doctors D and F had bidden him a final farewell. It had not been their intention to return, but at my request, they agreed to look in upon the patient about 10 the next night. When they had gone, I spoke freely with M. Valdemar on the subject of his approaching dissolution, as well as, more particularly, of the experiment proposed. he still professed himself quite willing and even anxious to have it made, and urged me to commence it at once. A male and a female nurse were in attendance, but I did not feel myself altogether at liberty to engage in a task of this character with no more reliable witnesses than these people, in case of sudden accident, might prove. That feels like that sentence isn't finished. Sorry, let me reread that. But I did not feel myself altogether at liberty to engage in a task of this character with no more reliable witnesses than these people, in case of sudden accident might prove. Okay, I think I get it now. I think I just read it wrong the first time. Anyway, in my head or whatever. I therefore postponed operations until about 8 the next night, when the arrival of a medical student with whom I had some acquaintance, Mr. Theodore L. There's another letter there, but I can't tell if it's an L or an I, so he could be Theodore LL. But whatever. Mr. Theodore relieved me from further embarrassment. It had been my design originally to wait for the physicians, but I was induced to proceed first by the urgent entreaties of M. Valdemar, and secondly by my conviction that I had not a moment to lose, as he was evidently sinking fast. So this is Theodore. He's calling him now Mr. L, so I'll just refer to him that way. Mr. L was so kind as to accede to my desire that he would take notes of all that occurred. And it is from his memoranda that what I now have to relate is. It is from his memoranda that what I now have to relate is, for the most part, either condensed or copied verbatim. Sorry, I got tripped up there for a second. Maybe I should drink some water. Okay. I wanted about 5 minutes of 8. When taking the patient's hand, I begged him to state as distinctly as he could to Mr. L whether he, M. Valdemar, was entirely willing that I should make the experiment of mesmerizing him in his then condition. He replied feebly, yet quite audibly, "Yes, I wish to be mesmerized," adding immediately afterward, "I fear you have deferred it too long." While he spoke thus, I commenced the passes which I had already found effectual in subduing him. He was evidently influenced with the first lateral stroke of my hand across his forehead, but although I exerted all my powers, no further perceptible effect was induced until some minutes after 10 o'clock, when Doctors D and F called, according to appointment. I explained to them, in a few words, what I designed, and, as they opposed no objection, saying that the patient was already in the death agony, I proceeded without hesitation. Exchanging, however, the lateral passes for downward ones, and directing my gaze entirely into the right eye of the sufferer. By this time his pulse was imperceptible, and his breathing was stertorous. Stertorous? This is another word. Sorry. Stertorous. A type of noisy breathing that sounds like heavy snoring, and is a sign that someone is having trouble breathing smoothly. Huh. How do I pronounce that word, though? Stertorous. Okay, so it's just how it looks. Cool. I'm just stupid. Anyway. His breathing was stertorous and at intervals of half a minute. This condition was nearly unaltered for a quarter of an hour. At the expiration of this period, however, a natural, although very deep sigh escaped the bosom of the dying man, and the stertorous breathing ceased. That is to say, its stertorousness was no longer apparent, and the intervals were undiminished. The patient's extremities were of an icy coldness. At 5 minutes before 11, I perceived unequivocal signs of the mesmeric influence. The glassy roll of the eye was changed for that expression of an easy inward examination, which is never seen except in the case of sleepwalking, and which it is quite impossible to mistake. With a few rapid lateral passes, I made the lids quiver, as in incipient sleep, and with a few more, I closed them altogether. I was not satisfied, however, with this, but continued the manipulations vigorously, and with the fullest exertion of the will until I had completely stiffened the limbs of the slumberer. After placing them in a seemingly easy position, the legs were at full length, the arms were nearly so, and reposed on the bed at a moderate distance from the loins. The head was very lightly elevated. When I had accomplished this, it was fully midnight, and I requested the gentlemen present to examine M. Valdemar's condition. After a few experiments, they admitted him to be in an unusually perfect state of mesmeric trance. The curiosity of both the physicians was greatly excited. Dr. D resolved at once to remain with the patient all night, while Dr. F took leave with a promise to return at daybreak. Mr. L and the nurses remained. We left M. Valdemar entirely undisturbed until about 3 o'clock in the morning, when I approached him and found him to be in precisely the same condition as when Dr. F went away. That is to say, he lay in the same position, the pulse was imperceptible, the breathing was gentle, scarcely noticeable, unless through the application of a mirror to the lips. The eyes were closed naturally, and the limbs were as rigid and as cold as marble. Still, the general appearance was certainly not that of death. As I approached M. Valdemar, I made a kind of half-effort to influence his right arm into pursuit of my own. That line confuses me for some reason. To influence his right arm into the pursuit of my own. So he tried to make his right arm grab his? I think? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he means by pursuit. Anyway. As I passed the ladder gently to and fro above his person, in such experiments with this patient, I had never perfectly succeeded before, and assuredly, I had little thought of succeeding now. But to my astonishment, his arm was very readily, although feebly, followed every direction I assigned it with mine. Oh, okay, I see. He wants his arm to follow his. He wants him to... Okay, I see. He's trying to just control the movements. Okay. I determined to hazard a few words of conversation. "M. Valdemar," I said, "are you asleep?" He made no answer, but I perceived a tremor about the lips, and was thus induced to repeat the question again and again. At its third repetition, his whole frame was agitated by the very slight shivering, the eyelids unclosed themselves so far as to display a white line of a ball, and the lips moved sluggishly. And from between them, in a barely audible whisper, issued the words, "Yes, asleep now. Do not wake me. Let me die so." I here felt the limbs and found them as rigid as ever. The right arm, as before, obeyed the direction of my hand. I questioned the sleepwaker again. Sleepwaker? Whatever. "Do you still feel pain in the breast, M. Valdemar?" The answer now was immediate, but even less audible than before. "No pain. I am dying." I did not think it advisable to disturb him further just then, and nothing more was said or done until the arrival of Dr. F., who came a little before sunrise and expressed unbounded astonishment at finding the patient still alive. After feeling the pulse and applying the mirror to the lips, he requested me to speak to the sleepwaker again. I did so, saying, "One second, I'm going to drink water." That's not what he said. That was me. This is what he said. "M. Valdemar, do you still sleep?" As before, some minutes elapsed ere a reply was made, and during the interval the dying man seemed to be collecting his energies to speak. At my fourth repetition of the question, he said very faintly, almost inaudibly, "Yes, still asleep, dying." It was now the opinion, or rather the wish of the physicians, that M. Valdemar should be suffered to remain undisturbed in his present apparent tranquil condition until death should supervene, and this, it was generally agreed, must now take place within a few minutes. I concluded, however... Uh-oh. There it is, okay. However, to speak to him once more, and merely repeated my previous question. While I spoke, there came a marked change over the countenance of the sleepwaker. The eyes rolled themselves slowly open, the pupils disappearing upwardly. The skin generally assumed a cadaverous hue, So he looks as though he's dead. Resembling not so much parchment as white paper. The circular hectic spots, which hitherto had been strongly defined in the center of each cheek, went out at once. I use this expression because the suddenness of their departure put me in a mind of nothing so much as the extinguishment of a candle by the puff of the breath. The upper lip, at the same time, writhed itself away from the teeth, which it had previously covered completely, while the lower jaw fell with an audible jerk, leaving the mouth widely extended and disclosing in full view the swollen and blackened tongue. I presume that no member of the party then present had been unaccustomed to deathbed horrors, but so hideous beyond conception was the appearance of M. Valdemar at this moment that there was a general shrinking back from the region of the bed. I now feel that I have reached the point of this narrative at which every reader will be startled into positive disbelief. It is my business, however, to simply proceed. I mean, I know this is obviously a fictional story, but I think it's funny that he's like, "I know you're not gonna believe me, but I'm just gonna continue." Which, I mean, yeah, what else could he do? I guess he could stop, but why would he do that? Anyway, there was no longer the faintest sign of vitality in M. Valdemar, and concluding him to be dead, we were consigning him to the charge of the nurses when a strong vibratory motion was observable in the tongue. This continued for perhaps a minute. At the expiration of this period, there issued from the distended and motionless jaws a voice, such as it would be a madness in me to attempt to describe, or to attempt describing. There are indeed 2 or 3 epithets which might be considered as applicable to it in part. I might say, for example, that the sound was harsh and broken and hollow, but the hideous whole is indescribable, for the simple reason that no similar sounds have ever jarred upon the ear of humanity. There were 2 particulars, nevertheless, which I thought then, and still think, might fairly be stated as characteristic of the intonation, as well adapted to convey some idea of its unearthly peculiarity. In the first place, the voice seemed to reach our ears, at least mine, from a vast distance, or from some deep cavern within the earth. In a second place, it impressed me. I fear, indeed, that it would be impossible for me to make myself comprehended, as gelatinous or glutinous matters impress the sense of touch. And I will be right back. Sorry about that, my dear listeners. I ran out of water, and I had to go get more. Where did I leave off? Right. As gelatinous or gluttonous matters impress the sense of touch. Okay. So, sorry, I'm still sort of processing what I just read. Or read a moment ago. I had to get water and stuff. So it seems that Valdemar is doing something, seemingly from beyond the grave. And that there was a voice, but we don't know what it said. I guess we're about to find out. But he was more so just describing the voice, or saying that it has a lack of description. Anyway, I will continue now. I have spoke both of sound and of voice. I mean to say that the sound was one of distinct, of even wonderfully thrilling distinct syllabification. M. Valdemar spoke obviously in reply to the question I had propounded to him a few minutes before. I had asked him, it will be remembered if he still slept. It will be remembered. Okay, so he's just reminding us there. It will be remembered if he still slept. He now said, yes, no, I have been sleeping, and now I am dead. No person present even affected to deny or attempted to repress the unutterable, shuddering horror which these few words thus uttered were so well calculated to convey. Mr. L, the student, swooned. I wonder if swooned had a different context back then, because that's not how I would describe someone reacting to something like this. The nurses immediately left the chamber and could not be induced to return. My own impressions I would not pretend to render intelligible to the reader. For nearly an hour, we busied ourselves, silently, without the utterance of a word, in endeavors to retrieve Mr. L. When he came... Okay, so he fainted is what he means. Okay. I swooned. Sorry. When he came to himself, we addressed ourselves again to an investigation of M. Valdemar's condition. It remained, in all respects, as I have at last described it, with the exception that the mirror no longer afforded evidence of respiration. An attempt to draw blood from the arm failed. I should mention, too, that this limb was no farther subject to my will. So, okay. Okay. So it wouldn't... He couldn't move it, I guess. Under magnetism or maybe otherwise? I don't know. It's probably very stiff. Sorry, I'm still just processing things. Anyway, I endeavored in vain to make it follow the direction of my hand. The only real indication, indeed, of the mesmeric influence was now found in the vibratory movement of the tongue whenever I addressed M. Valdemar a question. He seemed to be making an effort to reply, but had no longer sufficient volition. To queries put to him by any other person than myself, he seemed utterly insensible, although I endeavored to place each member of the company in mesmeric rapport with him. Okay, so he tried to get everyone to speak with him to see if he would respond. Everyone present. Which I believe at this point is just the two doctors, D and F, I think were their names. L, Mr. L, the student, and himself. Which are the four people. The four men outside the bed. I believe that I have now related all that is necessary to an understanding of the sleepwaker's state at this epoch. Other nurses were procured, and at 10 o'clock I left the house in company with the two physicians and Mr. L. In the afternoon we all called again to see the patient. His condition remained precisely the same. We had now some discussion as to the propriety and feasibility of awakening him, but we had little difficulty in agreeing that no good purpose would be served by so doing. It was evident that, so far, death, or what is usually termed death, had been arrested by the mesmeric process. It seemed clear to us all that to awaken M. Valdemar would be merely to ensure his instant, or at least his speedy, dissolution. From this period until the close of last week, an interval of nearly 7 months, we continued to make daily calls at M. Valdemar's house, accompanied now and then by medical and other friends. All this time the sleepwaker remained exactly as I have at last described him. The nurse's attentions were continual. It was on Friday last that we finally resolved to make the experiment of awakening, or attempting to awaken him. And it is the perhaps unfortunate result of this latter experiment which has given rise to so much discussion in private circles, to so much of what I cannot help thinking unwarranted popular feeling. For the purpose of relieving M. Valdemar from the mesmeric trance, I made use of the customary passes. These, for a time, were unsuccessful. The first indication of revival was afforded by a partial descent of the iris. It was observed as especially remarkable that this lowering of the pupil was accompanied by the profuse outflowing of a yellowish ichor from beneath the lids, of a pungent and highly offensive odor. Oh. What are the... Oh, okay. I'm going to reread that really quick. But this is the last... We're about to go to the last page. Which makes sense. It did seem like it was nearing the end. For the purpose of relieving M. Valdemar from the mesmeric trance, I made use of customary passes. Okay, so I think he... I don't know exactly what he means by customary passes, but I'm assuming it's things like what he did at the beginning, which I forget the words he used, but like the touching of like the forehead and stuff. And the eyes, the eyelids and stuff. These for a time were unsuccessful. The first indication of revival was afforded by a partial descent of the iris. It was observed as especially remarkable that this lowering of the pupil was accompanied by the profuse outflowing of a yellowish ichor from beneath the lids, of a pungent and highly offensive odor. Ah, I see. I have an idea of what that is, but I want to wait and see if I'm correct. It was now suggested that I should attempt to influence the patient's arm, as heretofore I made the attempt, and as heretofore, so as he's done before, okay. I read it wrong, sorry. I made the attempt and failed. Dr. F then intimated a desire to have me put a question. I did so as follows. M. Valdemar, can you explain to us what your feelings or wishes now? There was an instant return of the hectic circles on the cheeks, the tongue quivered, or rather rolled violently in the mouth, although the jaws and lips remained rigid as before. And at length, the same hideous voice which I had already described broke forth. For God's sake, quick, put me to sleep, or quick, waken me. Quick, I say to you that I am dead. I was thoroughly unnerved, and for an instant remained undecided what to do. At first, I made an endeavor to recompose the patient, but failing in this, through total abeyance of the will, I retraced my steps, and as earnestly struggled to awaken him. In this attempt, I soon saw that I should be successful, or at least, I soon fancied that my success would be complete, and I am sure that all in the room were prepared to see the patient awaken. For what really occurred, however, is quite impossible that any human being could have been prepared. As I rapidly made the mesmeric passes, amid ejaculations of "dead, dead," absolutely bursting from the tongue and not from the lips of the sufferer, his whole frame at once, within the space of a single minute, or even less, shrunk, crumbled, and absolutely rotted away beneath my hands. Upon the bed, before the whole company, there lay a nearly liquid mass of loathsome, detestable putrescence. The end. That's fucking disgusting. Pardon my French. I don't usually swear on this podcast, but I don't... it's fine. But wow. I don't know what to say about that. I don't feel like... I guess just the concepts of it are what is frightening, rather than... and the imagery, I suppose, rather than anything like, I feel like The Pit and the Pendulum, another, of course, famous story from Edgar Allan Poe, is very famous for it just being absolutely terrifying. But it's also just, of course, a well-known story. But it's absolutely terrifying. But I feel like, and another one, did he write? Wait, let me look this up. I don't want to misspeak and say something that is incorrect, even though I do that all the time. Well, not all the time. I try not to as much as I can. It's his story, right? Yes, it is. A Cask of Amontillado. That's another story that's pretty terrifying in some of its concepts and just the story itself. And I feel like this is, I don't know, there's just something about the nature of the story that doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like a horror story. But it is. I know it is. I know it to be that. It's very strange to me. Just my thoughts about this right now, which I'm trying to convey. But I guess it's like so what it seems is what happened, or my thinking of what happened, and I think I'm right, though it didn't confirm or deny what I was thinking when I said when it mentions after I read the paragraph about him starting the revival process and seeing the yellowish ichor from beneath the lids. What I think that is, and given the ending, I think I feel more valid in that thought, is that it's the eyes. His eyeballs had like liquefied, disintegrated, whatever, disillusioned, as he kept putting it, although he was talking about death in general when he said that. But yeah, so what it seems is that his eyes turned to liquid, and slowly, as the rest of him came back, the rest of his body rotted away into a liquid mass. I mean, yeah, and he was conscious for that. That's what's horrifying, I suppose. Yeah. Wow. It was interesting. I haven't read too many. There's so many Poe stories that I haven't read. He's one of my favorite authors, but I've read more of his poems, I think, than I've read his short stories. I know he had a pretty long-running, I want to call it a comic strip, but I don't think it was, but it was in like a paper. I forget what it's called, but it features a story of shipwreck and mutiny and stuff. Crap, what is that called? I almost said The Tales of Huckleberry Finn, but that is not Edgar Allan Poe. What is it called? I can look that up really quick before we end here, but because I did go on for about an hour. That was much longer than I thought it would take. Edgar Allan Poe story about a mutiny at sea. Oh, it was called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. So yeah, it's I guess it's a novel that he wrote. I think it was just a serialization of like short stories featuring this character, but it had an overarching plot. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I've heard of it. But yeah, I digress. I may do this again at some point. Hopefully I will get better at reading, but I do like to stop every now and then and like just talk about what is said and what I'm thinking of and things like that. Of course, I'd like to do this at the end as well. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any more thoughts I have to say about this. I don't know, it's interesting how he tries to describe the voice. I'm thinking that Poe's idea was that something in like the throat or mouth had stiffened or rotted away in such or gone into like such a state of like rigor mortis, I guess. Something with death, the death of the body, that the spirit had to speak for him, because his spirit still lingered and was conscious to an extent, which is, I don't know. It's something to do with mesmerism, obviously. I don't know, I guess is the best way to put it. I don't know. Those are just my thoughts on it and what it could be, I guess. I don't know. But, yeah. I hope you enjoyed, despite me, interrupting every now and then. Either with, misspeaking, drinking water, or, as I do right now, or, anything else. But, yeah, I hope you enjoyed. You can find other episodes of Paranormal Express on our YouTube channel, though not all of them are there. If you want to go somewhere where all of them are, you can go to our Spotify for podcasters. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on I don't think we're on Apple Podcast, actually. I should get that sorted away. It's because I don't have an Apple account. But you can find us on Amazon, Apple Podcasts, most other places where you listen to podcasts, iHeartRadio. Yeah, I have another podcast called Spellbound Soiree, where I sort of discuss or tell stories from a town or the world in general, in a fantasy world, not a real world, obviously. But yeah, I hope, like I said, I hope you enjoyed. You can subscribe to us to make sure you keep up to date on these whenever I end up posting them, though they seem to be few and far between. Though I could do more things like this that would be relatively easy to do. Like I did this, I just sat down and did it. Usually I have to do a lot of prep work for these types of things. So yeah, I also stream now, every now and then at least. I've been doing it relatively frequently, but I haven't done it for the last few days, mostly because I was working on that Spellbound Soiree thing that fell through. I say a lot. But yeah, so you can check me out on Twitch, which I believe my @ on Twitch is Iacchus, IACCHUS __. That's a double underscore, because the other ones were taken. But yeah. I'm trying to think of other socials I'm on. I'm also on Blue Sky at iacchus.bsky.social, I believe is the @ I'm just thinking off the top of my head. On Tumblr, I have a few different blogs that you can follow. One for Paranormal Express, one for Spellbound Soiree and Streams, which is called The Annals of the Arcane, which is the name of the YouTube channel as well. Though you can find it by searching at Iacchus, I believe. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you. Like I said already, just reiterating myself, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again in the future. Goodbye, and sleep well, my dear listeners.